And so I'm gonna tell you the story because I was afraid. When I tell you I was scared as hell, oh my God, that was a rough time for me. Let's talk about aliens. Welcome back to this channel. It is your resident internet psychic medium and spiritual advisor, Mr. Crane, and today is finally my day to say that I told you so. So I'm taking requests. It's so interesting because I don't actually do this, but I figured why not? We'll start something new. Blah Blah Cake 105 asked me if you have any thoughts on the government revealing to the public that galactic beings do exist. I would love to hear those. And Vibes X Ryan said, could you talk about your thoughts on aliens and how to communicate and meet them? Laughing my ass off, I want to meet a fine alien man. Honestly, Vibes X Ryan, go off. I love it for you. So the government has decided that they want to be forthcoming and honest, and they want to blow the whistle on the fact that there are like galactic beings. And honestly, my opinion on that is that I feel really bad for the whistleblowers, because with things like that, you cannot just blow the whistle. You have to be told to do that. There is somebody behind the scenes who has picked puppets in order to fulfill an agenda. Because you cannot be dealing with aliens for this long and be the first whistleblower. You're telling me that everyone seriously is really good at holding that level of secrets? Honestly. People on the YouTubes have been talking about this for a really long time, actually, about how there are galactic beings, galactic federations, aliens. I know that I mentioned it, I think for the first time on this channel about 2 years ago now. I did a prediction video. And in that video, I did talk about how we were going to reach a point where people are going to start talking about aliens, UFOs, unidentified sightings, and that the government or that the news will slowly start talking about it. And that what was going to happen was that it'll sort of be trickled into conversation here and there. That way people can get used to hearing about it. That way, when they are ready to make the massive announcement like they have just made, nobody is really freaking out about it because the work has already kind of been done prior to them actually making the announcement, right? So when it comes to like the government doing that, I mean, it wasn't for us. They're not telling that information because it benefits us. They're telling us that information because for whatever reason it benefits them, okay? But I digress. I want to talk to you about the fun stuff, and I want to talk to you about my experience dealing with galactic beings. One, I prefer to call them galactic beings because I do find the name alien or the word alien to be really rude. I think it's really presumptuous to assume that they're aliens, but we think that we're native of this planet when we're not. And I think it's really interesting how people haven't really considered the fact that maybe we are actually the ones that are alien to this planet, and that maybe perhaps the planet didn't originally belong to us, right? But as far as galactics go, as I like to call them, they are beings, right? So some people are like, well, what are they? Like, what form are they in? They are actual beings. They are what we would consider to be people, some of them. Some of them are sort of maybe animal beings. Some of them are more insect-like. Some of them are kind of like plant-like. Some galactic beings have the ability to sort of shift in and out of like a material form or a material state. They're all really different, right? And there are federations. There's this concept of galactic federations. People talk about it. My understanding, and this is channeled information, is that there is more than one federation. So something that I don't think I've actually really ever properly talked about on this channel is that I've actually been working with a galactic council since 2019. They actually appeared to me and then asked me if I'd be willing to work with them. And that's how I know all of this. There are galactic federations. There are advisory groups. There are galactic councils. And each one of these groups kind of has a different purpose. You have some federations that function sort of like allies, because you have to think space is so vast that it's only natural to do things like collaborate or group up together. And so there are federations that do this, or groups of galactic beings that do this, that may be from different areas, and they have sort of alliances. It's not necessarily about war. It's just about the sharing of knowledge, or the sharing of resources. And so you have some that serve that purpose. There are some federations that sort of regulate certain regions or areas of space, because space is just so big, which is why there's so many of them. There's not like one central, major, overarching, dominant body. So you may have like federations here and there that are just dealing with the regulatory aspects of just trying to maintain a certain space, maintain the order of it. You have special interest groups. And so you may have advisory councils that are special interests. Some groups are specifically focused on knowledge, acquiring knowledge. There are some groups that like science, and it can be science about anything. It can be the science of people or different kind of galactic beings, maybe the study of. It can be the science of technology. It can be the science of space and time. There's different groups for different kinds of interests. There are also like advisory boards, and then these advisory boards advise on different things. So you may have an advisory board that kind of works with like a federation, for example, in terms of maybe how to act, how to trade, how to communicate with different beings, because different beings have ways of communication, even though the most common form of communication amongst these beings is telepathy. But you may have like an advisory board that does that. The one that I have done work with is specifically what they told me, a galactic council. They introduced themselves as the council. And so I'm gonna tell you the story because I was afraid. When I tell you I was scared as hell, oh my God, that was a rough time for me. About in 2019 saw light beings, and I did make a video on about this a while ago. And at that time, I thought that light beings were light beings, and like maybe they were like separate from like a galactic being. Thinking about it now, I'm not so sure if that's the case. Like I'm not so sure if they are separate from that. But what I saw, it was in my living room, and it was two light beings, and I'll put a picture over here of similar of like what they looked like. They were gigantic. When I tell you it was two of them, and the presence, I damn near shit myself. It was one of the most terrifying things I had ever seen. And it wasn't terrifying because they meant me harm. What I do remember feeling was that I knew that I wasn't in danger. It was one, the shock and the surprise of it all. And it was the level of vibration, like the energetic frequency was so intense that I just could not handle it. And to be confronted with that, be confronted with things that don't look like me, and they're all in my apartment living room and they weren't invited. Are you kidding me? I shit myself. I couldn't handle it. I freaked out. And then I was like, don't you ever come back here again. And then so I made an agreement that if they need to talk to me, that they needed to do so from a distance, because what the hell is that? And so I don't know if these beings are actually separate or the same, you know. So the way I've classified it is that at the end of the day, we are all part of existence, regardless of what kind of category you want to put on it. It's all part of existence. My brain classified it that way, and I was able to go to sleep at night. But I did lose like 3-4 nights of sleep because I was so scared that like if I got up to go to the kitchen, that they would just be sitting in my living room or something like that, and I would walk out like this, and I would go, oh my God, please don't be there. If you're in there, like, please don't, I don't want to see you. I can't do this, right? Because even though I'm a psychic medium and I can talk to the dead, one thing I do not like is ghosts or any sort of like apparition. I don't want to see you, right? I am not there in my journey where my ego can like, my ego is just not evolved enough to like deal with that. It just really isn't. Like, I'm gonna need you to knock first, something. And actually, please don't knock, because that also would be equally as terrifying at being home and hearing knocking. Like, that's awful. But anyway, I digress. And so, but after that, because there was an agreement, when I had said that, I do remember seeing in my mind's eye, because I did not have this conversation like face to face. It was like sort of like a telepathic type of communication. And I do remember seeing in my mind's eye, like a nod, like, yes, like we'll respect that. And then a little while later, I went into a channeling state. This is actually the first time I ever channeled. I wasn't a channel before. I wasn't interested in channeling. I didn't read about channeling. I didn't learn about channeling. I knew nothing about channeling at all. One day, I was sitting in my living room on the couch watching TV, and I felt the vibration in my apartment change. And I remember thinking, like, oh shit, this don't feel like it's of this world. Like I knew I had an awareness that like, uh-oh, like something was happening. I just couldn't figure out what it was. But the vibration in my apartment started to go up and I could feel it. And then I felt the vibration in my body go up. And now, mind you, I'm not trying to channel. So I'm not in a meditative state. I wasn't in a state where I was like, let me gain awareness. I was really just kind of like watching TV, just being normal. And the vibration in my body started to go up in a way that I was not controlling. It was just going up. And I was getting sort of, I'm trying to think of like a word that was sort of qualified, like how I felt. It wasn't like chills, but there was something, there's sort of like this prickly feeling that I get when my vibration starts to change. And it was happening all in my body. And it was just so intense. And then this thing happened where I started hearing these high pitched noises in my ears. And I immediately knew, I had like this sense of knowing that what was happening was that my ears were tuning. And then sounds started coming out of my throat, my voice. And I started, it almost sounded like making noise, but trying to find a note on a scale. So I'm sitting there not controlling any of this. And just randomly, my voice is like, ah, ah, ah. And I remember knowing, oh, like that's tuning to that whatever is happening, my ears, my mouth, my throat, whatever is tuning to something because there's some sort of communication and something needs to happen. Now, when this was happening, funny enough, I actually wasn't scared. I was more so like curious because I hadn't, one, had never heard of that really happening before. And two, I knew I wasn't doing it. And so I was so curious as to what was happening. And it wasn't a feeling of like not being in charge of my body, like a possession type of thing. It wasn't like that. It was just, I just had a knowing that like somebody wanted to talk to me, right? And so my body did this for what felt like 10 to 15 minutes of like making the noises and like tuning in my ears and tuning. And then eventually I could see it in my mind's eye like a arc. And the arc was different people sitting, and there was one head person in the center of the arc, and this one head person was the one that was like the main representative or like the main delegate. And all these people that were sitting in the arc were from different places. They weren't from the same place. They all had different titles, and they all had different like areas of specialty. And they all were very just sort of, it kind of reminded me of what you would picture like a galactic UN to look like. It kind of looked like that. And so this woman, she was like, hi, I want to introduce ourselves. We are the Galactic Council. And I was like, okay. As they're introducing themselves, they're using my voice box to talk. So all of the tuning of the mouth, the words were actually leaving my mouth. So I can see them in my mind's eye. They're talking to me, but the words are leaving the mouth. And the way that I know that they're the ones talking is because they have one, the sound changes, right? So my whole voice, it just changes. It sounds like I have an accent from a place that I've never been to before. But then also, one thing that they do that I found really interesting is that they stumble over words. So sometimes when they're trying to explain things to me and they're having a hard time picking the words, they have this tendency to say, you humans call it, I think you humans use this word. And then they would search for the word and then maybe ask me if that was the right word to use, and I would confirm or deny or something like that. But the message was actually leaving my actual mouth, right? And so it was very friendly. It wasn't scary or anything like that. They introduced themselves and they said, we will be working with you. And I said, well, why? And they didn't actually give me the answer. that was just kind of like the first meeting. And it was sort of like, we just wanted to introduce ourselves to you because we're going to have a long working relationship. It's like, it almost felt like starting a new job. Like it wasn't like magical. It was a very sort of matter of fact experience. And they were just like, we want to introduce ourselves to you. We're going to be working together a lot in the future. And so we just wanted to become acquainted. And then they said, we have a lot more to tell you, but because we recognize that this is a lot, and they acknowledged that it was a lot on the body, because they acknowledged that the body was channeling, there was like this conversation of like, we're going to back out, right? To allow you to like process, but then also like calibrate for your body to have a moment, right? And then that was the end of the first meeting. And then there was another meeting, maybe within like 3 days or so, where my body started to do that again. And I realized at that point what was happening. And so at that point there was no fighting it. I was just like, okay, they want to talk to something. And what I realized at that point was that they were helping my body turn into an antenna. So it wasn't so much like them trying to use my body, more so of helping my body tune into their particular frequency where they were, so we can hear each other, kind of like a radio, which is why my voice would make those sounds, because it was like trying to tune, and why my ears was picking up on different frequencies, because it was trying to tune, kind of trying to find a signal. And then at that point, they explain more about an advisory council in a sense of they do what? Guess what? Advise, right? And they let me know that what I can do in terms of how I work with them is ask them questions. So if I have questions about anything that's happening in the universe or anything that's sort of happening in humanity, that I can sort of beam up, all I have to do is tune in, and that I can just ask them, and that they would be more than willing to give me the answer for it. I had asked them, well, how do I tune to you? Like, if you're not contacting me, I don't know how to contact you. And they said, the way you contact us is by picturing our face in your mind's eye, and then holding that focus, and it'll ping us. Or it'll ping the specific being that you're actually trying to talk to. You just focus on that one, and it pings, it'll ping them, they'll let you know. And it's like a telepathy thing. And that you just have to focus on it hard enough. So for example, if the person's name is Shannon, right? And that wasn't the name, but like if the person's name is Shannon, you would picture Shannon's in your mind's eye, and then you would go Shannon, Shannon, Shannon. You can say it out loud, you can say it in your mind, right? But that you just kind of want to beam it out. And they explained to me that that's how I get a hold of them. And so I said, okay, well, that's great, but how am I helping you? This is supposed to be a working relationship. I don't understand why me out of all, like, what's my job for you? And they said, oh, well, our agreement was, and I was like, our agreement. And they were like, oh yeah, like we talked about this, like kind of like, oh, before you incarnated, this was the deal, girl, remember? It was kind of like that. And then I was like, okay. And they said that the agreement that we had was that what I do for them is I give them information about Earth, specifically around love, and specifically around how humans experience love, and how humans experience love in the mind, in emotions, in the heart, but then also in the body. And that it was my job to also like just explain the love process to them. This particular sort of galactic council, they study many beings, right? So the way they showed it to me was, in my mind's eye, I saw like a screen. So, I mean, it's so crazy to say, but if you think of like Star Trek, there was like this big, massive screen that like this arc of people were watching. And on the screen were different worlds. And so some people focused more on this world, some people focused more on this world, but it was like this council that kind of watched over the world. And I wouldn't call them protectors, but the idea is that council is actually in communication with like beings from all over the world, and there's like multiple beings. It's not just like one or two. It's not a select chosen few. It's a lot. And they told me that like even on Earth, there's like millions of people that they work with specifically that's on Earth. And everyone has a different assignment. Mine just happens to be love. I'm not the only person that focuses on that. I'm like one of the many. It just happens to be what my assignment and my ideal working relationship is with them. And then through the exchange of this information, it's a way of sharing wisdom, but doing so quickly. Like, and it's just efficient way of doing it. So for example, like a lot of people will say that you incarnate into Earth and this Earth is like a lesson at school, right? The idea is if you have some people that are incarnate on Earth, everything that they're learning, they can share it back to the council. And then those beings may not have to incarnate on Earth to learn the lesson. They can learn vicariously through what it is that you're going through. And so in this particular council, the people that I work with, the ones that are just interested in like love dynamics and how humans experience it, we just share the information, and it just saves them a step of not necessarily having to incarnate into Earth. Love and how humans experience love is they find really fascinating, because from a galactic perspective, everything is love, everything is peace. But because there's so much duality on Earth, humans have to learn to love. Whereas when you are in your place of existence, or like the galactic beings, they don't have to learn to love. Love is just a natural state of existence for them. It's just their natural frequency. Being able to move that way, being like compassionate in that way, it's natural. It doesn't have to be taught. Whereas for humans on Earth, you have to learn to love. And the journey of learning to love is really difficult, a lot of times very traumatic. And that is why our relationship with love is so complicated. It's also why we have a way of experiencing love that's tangible, right? So for example, as a galactic being, they experience love more so in a vibration, in a knowing. Whereas humans can sense love in the body. We can feel it, right? Like when you go through a heartbreak and it hits you right in the chest, we can feel it. That is something that they actually find really fascinating. And so every once in a while, they'll pop in and ask me questions on that. And so the times when I've noticed that they would pop in would be at times where I've had like major like relationship experience, or like emotional experiences that really shocked me, and then somehow would move through that and be like, you know what, I'm going to choose to love in this particular circumstance, or I'm going to choose to love this person in this particular circumstance. When I would go through that process, that's when they would pop in, they would beam in, and they would ask me, but why and how? Why are you making the decision to do that? And then how are you doing it? And so when I do communicate with them, it's a lot of, well, humans are, and humans do, because da 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 da. And then their response to me usually is, oh, okay. Like we didn't know that. And the funniest thing I would say with the council is that the idea of like space and time is different. It's different everywhere you go. And so Earth, we have this idea, our the way we view time, it's so long and it's so linear, whereas for other beings, it's like a drop in the bucket. So for example, there was one time when I was talking to the council, and the head woman, I don't know her name, I actually never asked for her name because I just recognized her face, she was like, okay, great, like thank you for the information, we'll reconvene shortly. I said, okay, cool. So I actually waited. And then like a day went by, and then another day went by, and I'm like waiting for them to like beam me. It's almost like they beamed my consciousness up, right? Like, okay, like, oh, like where are you, right? And but like they didn't come. Like 2 or 3 months went by, and when they finally appeared again, I asked her. I said, "Where have you been? You told me you were coming back shortly. It's been months." She laughed and she said, "Oh, sorry, I forgot that Earth has a different time." She said, "It's only been 5 minutes for us." And then it was like this thing. And I was like, oh. So, you know, they're beings, and they are fascinating, and there's different kinds, and there are different ones, and they are alive too, by the way. So when we think about like galactic beings, they are incarnate sometimes wherever they are. Some galactic beings can move their consciousness, so they may be incarnate at one time and not at a different time. They can like materialize a form and stuff like that. But they are fun. They are friendly. They're not here trying to hurt us. They are actually very curious in the way that humans are curious. If you look at humans, or even if you have a look at like the animal kingdom, where you like animals in general, and we're animals, right? We're primates. Animals are very curious. They just spend their whole existence learning about the world and learning how things work. And it's no different for galactic beings. They are friendly. They're not here to hurt us. They are collaborative. They are cooperative. They are kind. They are helpful. And they're generous. They are all very different. They all have different personalities because, again, they're beings too. And so, I have only had like positive experiences with them. When I was a kid, though, I did see a UFO. I was like 12 or 13 and I saw a UFO on my way home from playing with my friend. It was like 8 o'clock, but it was dark out at that point. And I remember I had a Razor scooter and I was scootering, right? And I looked up and there was this UFO. When I tell you I wanted to die of fear, I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. 2 weeks went by. The craziest thing, the scariest thing about that experience is that I was actually with a family member at that time. I looked up into the sky and I saw this UFO and it was low. And from my memory, not only was it low, it was so low that the tops of trees were like swaying, right? And it was bright. It had all these lights on it. I'm scared. I'm running from it. I had a family member with me because we were both playing outside. That person was behind me saying, "What are you doing? Why are you running?" And I remember looking up saying, "You don't see that? You don't see that?" And I'm thinking I'm moving, right? And this person said, see what? To this day, this person maintains that they saw absolutely nothing. For me, it was almost as if I could reach up and touch it. Mind you, I'm 13, so there was no drugs and there was no alcohol, okay? I also had my nap that day. So I was coherent. But that person says that they never saw anything. To me, that was the biggest thing I had ever seen in the sky, and I had never seen it again. And I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. And then, we are here now. Yeah, so that's my take on it. I don't have too much to say about any other things. I will say though, the council that I worked with have asked me maybe about a year and a half ago to talk about it and to talk about them. And I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do that because people aren't ready for it. And so what I've done over time is sort of maybe drop little hints and every now and then in different videos, but I've never really fully touched on it. And and last thing, prior to the government releasing this information, they actually told me that it was going to be released. They told me 2 months ago. They beamed in. They said, "Hey, we have something to tell you." I said, "What's up?" They said, "It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be on the news. That people are going to be talking about us." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, they're talking about you as a being? They're talking about a different planet? I don't like. What do they mean?" And they were like, "No, they're going to be talking about like aliens as a whole, and it's going to happen in about 2 months, and it's going to be all over the news." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know. Thanks for the heads up." And then that was the whole conversation, and then that was it. And they beamed out. And that was about 2 months ago, and that was the last time I've spoken to them. So that's it. That's my story. That is my run-in. In terms of how to meet them, to be honest, I don't know. It wasn't something that I ever explored. There wasn't a time in my life where I thought, "Oh, I want to go meet them." The connection is there because they came to me. So I'm channeling. Hold on. They're talking. Call them is what they said. They said just call. What I can see, they're doing this. Like they just said just call out to them. They're saying that this is super weird, by the way, because I don't think I ever really I don't channel often while it's recording. They're saying that they're really excited that people know about them now. They're saying like they can't wait to be friends. There's this feeling like they get to meet new people, that they get to have friends, that they get to build camaraderie with the new group of people. It's very inviting. It's a very sort of like inviting feeling of like a woohoo type thing. And they're saying if you want to talk to us, just call us. Now, my understanding is that they're not showing up with a ship. So you would have to be someone that you have the ability to maybe channel. And then they wouldn't mind working with you or talking to you or asking or answering your questions. They're saying to ask them anything. They're saying that they would be happy to be of service. They would be happy to help you out. So if you have any questions about Earth or life or even what they do, they're also saying, "Oh, get to know us. Get to know us. We would like ask me about me. Like ask me what I like." And that they would be willing to share that information with you. Yeah, so I guess if you wanted to get in touch with them, that would be what you would do. It would be similar to maybe calling upon spirit. So if you're someone that works with spirit guides or ancestors and you sort of call them in, it would be similar to that. The difference is how they would hear it. Because they're like actual beings and they're incarnate, it wouldn't be so much of like that heart to heart energetic connection. It would be more like they would hear you. They would just hear you. Like if you went, "Hey," they'd be like, "Yeah." They would just hear you. Yeah, you just have to want to meet them, and you would just call them in. I'm I'm trying to hear if they have anything else. They're not saying anything at the moment. The council that I'm looking at, they have gotten up out of their seats. They're no longer seating right now, and they are all standing. They're standing sort of like a V-like pattern. So there's one in the front, the main person, and then it kind of goes out like this, like a V. And they're standing there and they're smiling and it's almost like they're waiting. Like, okay, like can't wait to hear from you type of thing. So if you wanted to talk to them, just, reach out, say hi, they're, and like reach out as if you would reach out like a friend or something like that. Because really all they're about is like collaboration and cooperation. But they said they're really excited, and they're excited about sort of everyone knowing about them and not necessarily feeling like a secret. Some of them find the secret thing annoying, like, here they go again type of annoying. Not all of them, but some of them find it to be like that too. So anyway, that is what I know about Galactics. And kudos to you for catching me channeling, because I didn't expect that I would. But well, actually, I suppose I can't be surprised, because they would have known that I would be talking to you about this. They would have been waiting for their moment. Yeah, and that's all I have. That's all the information that I have about galactic beings. If they give me more information and they clear it with me and they say, yeah, you can disseminate that information, then I'm more than willing to do that. But that's all I have today. Okay, so that's going to bring me to the end of this video. As always, if you like what you see, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you soon.